There is no greater agony than living a life that is not your own, no deeper ache than carrying a name, a face, a destiny that was never truly yours. You feel it, don't you? That quiet unrest beneath the surface of your life. You've followed the rules, you've worn the smile, you've carried the expectations. And yet something within you remains untouched, unseen, unfulfilled. You may not speak it aloud, but your soul does. In the silences, in the restless nights, in the yearning you can't explain. That is the call, the invitation. Not to become something more, but to become what you already are. Beneath the conditioning, the roles, the performance, there is a deeper you. A self not made by the world, but born with you. And the journey toward that self is what we call individuation. Most do not take this journey. It is not convenient. It does not promise applause. It demands that you leave behind the familiar and descend into the depths of your own psyche. You must strip away the mask, confront the shadow, and reclaim the parts of yourself you are taught to disown. But make no mistake, this is not a journey of self-improvement. It is a journey of self-recovery. It begins with honesty. Not with the world, but with yourself. You must admit what no longer fits. The relationships, the careers, the identities that have been quietly suffocating you. It is not failure to walk away from what once defined you. It is the beginning of becoming real. And this becoming is painful, because it requires the death of what is false. The persona, the social mask we all wear, is useful for survival. But when it becomes fused with our identity, we begin to forget who we are beneath it. We perform instead of feel. We adapt instead of choose. We exist instead of live. And eventually, something cracks. Not as punishment, but as invitation. The soul will not remain silent forever. When the mask falls, we do not find peace immediately. We find the shadow, the denied self, the parts of us we labeled unworthy, dangerous, or wrong. But these are not monsters. They are wounded fragments waiting to be seen. The anger you repress, it protects your boundaries. The sadness you bury, it connects you to your truth. The ambition you fear, it holds your voice, your creativity, your fire. Integration is the alchemy of the soul. When we stop judging these parts and begin listening to them, they transform. We do not eliminate the darkness, we illuminate it. And in doing so, we become whole. Not perfect, not pure, but whole. A soul that holds both the light and the dark with reverence. But before the awakening, there is often collapse. The life you built from the outside and begins to crumble. You may feel lost, disoriented, undone. But this unraveling is not the end. It is the threshold. You are not breaking down. You are breaking open. The ego resists this stage because it fears death. But the soul rejoices because it knows something truer is being born. The journey of individuation cannot be outsourced. No one can walk it for you. But you are never truly alone. Every step into your depths brings you closer to a deeper connection with yourself, with the collective unconscious, with the source of your being. You begin to see others not through fear or comparison, but with compassion, because you have met yourself in the most sacred of ways. This journey is not quick. It is not linear. It requires patience, courage, and radical honesty. But it is the only path that leads to lasting inner peace. Not the peace that avoids conflict, but the peace that lives through it. a peace that cannot be taken, because it was never dependent on the outer world to begin with. You are not here to become what others expect. You are here to become what you were born to be. And that becoming requires descent, confrontation, transformation. But on the other side, there is something you cannot find in roles, masks, or applause. There is wholeness. And it is worth everything. The call to inner authenticity is not heard in the noise of the world. It comes in whispers, in the quiet. Ache beneath success, in the uneasy silence between conversations, in the haunting sense that something essential is missing. Most ignore this whisper. They drown it out with obligation, distraction, or applause. But for those who cannot turn away, for those whose sensitivity is too attuned to the pulse of the unseen, the whisper becomes unbearable. It grows into a longing, a yearning for something deeper, something real. This longing is the beginning of individuation, the return to oneself. There is a secret pain in living a life that is praised by the world, but rejected by the soul. You may look successful, stable, admired. You may play your role so well that even you forget it is a performance. But deep within, your being knows. It knows when you are betraying yourself for approval. It knows when your words are not your own, when your smile is a mask, when your choices are made from fear rather than truth. And this knowledge, when ignored, becomes suffering, not the kind that screams, but the kind that lingers like fog, slowly dulling the light within. From the earliest years, we are taught to perform, to become what is expected, to adapt to survive. And for many, especially the sensitive, this adaptation becomes identity. You learn to read what others need, to shape yourself accordingly. You become the pleaser, the helper, the responsible one, the invisible one. You lose your shape in order to fit the space around you. And for a time, it works. You are loved or something that resembles love. You are safe or something that mimics safety. But eventually, the cost becomes too great. You realize you have built a life around a self that is not truly you. To hear the call of authenticity is to reach the edge of this illusion. It is the moment when the performance begins to break down, when the soul no longer agrees to be hidden. But this awakening is not gentle. It is a tearing away. Because to live your truth, you must first see all the ways you have abandoned it. You must face the uncomfortable fact that you have allowed others to define you, that you have shaped your life around roles rather than reality. And this confrontation, though painful, is sacred. The world does not encourage authenticity. It rewards conformity, compliance, image. And so to live from your truth is a rebellion, a quiet, radical act of self-respect. It is not loud, not aggressive, but it is unshakable. Because once you begin to live from the center of your being, you cannot go back. You cannot unknow your truth. You cannot pretend the mask still fits. You begin to make different choices. You say no where you once said yes. You speak up where you once stayed silent. You let go of what no longer resonates, even if it once defined you. But authenticity is not just about expression. It is about integration. It is not simply saying what you feel. It is knowing what you feel and understanding where it comes from. It is not just rejecting falsehood. It is committing to the lifelong journey of truth. And truth is not fixed. It unfolds. It deepens. It demands that you remain awake to yourself, that you meet each new version of your becoming with courage and grace, This path is not without loneliness. When you stop performing, some will leave. They were attached to your mask, not your soul. But in their place, something far greater arrives. A sense of alignment, a quiet peace, a growing trust in your own inner compass. You begin to live not in reaction to the world, but in rhythm with your essence. And the world, though it may not always understand, begins to respond. You draw to yourself people, places, and purposes that resonate with your authenticity. To walk this path is to reclaim your life, not as it was given, but as it was meant to be lived. You are not here to play a role. You are here to embody your truth. And this embodiment is not an arrival. It is a continual unfolding. Each layer peeled back reveals a deeper clarity, a more profound freedom. You begin to realize that the most courageous thing you can do is simply be who you are fully, unapologetically, and without permission. Because the soul does not seek perfection. It seeks presence. And presence begins with the decision to no longer abandon yourself. The persona is a necessity. It is the face we wear to meet the world, the role we inhabit to function within society. It allows us to navigate relationships, careers, expectations. But over time, what was once a flexible garment becomes a rigid shell. We begin to believe that the mask is the self. We forget that we created it, and instead, it begins to create us. This forgetting is not without consequence. When the persona becomes fused with identity, the shadow begins to grow. And what we push beneath the surface does not disappear. It becomes the unseen force, shaping our lives from the depths of the unconscious. We wear masks to belong, to be loved, to feel safe. We present what the world rewards and hide what it rejects. We learn early which traits earn us praise and which must be exiled. And so, we send parts of ourselves into hiding. Our anger, our power, our sexuality, our sadness, our creativity, our vulnerability. All the aspects that felt too raw, too inconvenient, too dangerous, we banish them. But they do not die. They take on new forms. They become projections, impulses, symptoms. They become the shadow. The shadow is not evil. It is not something to be eradicated or defeated. It is the part of the self that longs to be seen, but has been denied the right to exist. It holds our unlived potential, our repressed truths, our forgotten voices. And, when left unacknowledged, it begins to act out, not to destroy us, but to get our attention. The more rigid the persona, the more powerful the shadow becomes. It finds ways to slip through the cracks, through dreams, through relationships, through emotional triggers. It speaks in symbols, in fears, in repetitive patterns that seem beyond our control. There comes a moment in every life when the mask begins to slip. Something shakes the persona, a loss, a betrayal, a sudden awakening, and we are confronted with the vast interior of our own being. What we find there can be terrifying. The emotions we thought we had buried long ago rise to the surface. We may feel rage without a target, grief without a story, desires we cannot explain. These are not signs of madness, they are signs of emergence. The shadow is surfacing, not to consume us, but to reunite us with the parts of ourselves we have lost. To meet the shadow is to reclaim your wholeness. But it is not a comfortable process. It asks for radical honesty. You must look at the ways you have betrayed your truth for acceptance, the times you have silenced your voice to keep the peace. The ways you've projected your disowned self onto others. You begin to see how much of your life has been shaped by avoidance of conflict, of emotion, of authenticity. And in that seeing, something begins to shift. The shadow softens. It is no longer the enemy. It becomes the guide. When you welcome the shadow, you begin to feel more alive. You stop walking on eggshells in your own life. You no longer fear your emotions because you understand their roots. You begin to speak with clarity, act with intention, love with boundaries. You become more integrated, more grounded. You discover that what you feared most within yourself was not darkness, but truth. And truth, even when uncomfortable, brings freedom. But be warned, the world often prefers the mask. People may resist your transformation, for your mask serves their comfort as well. You may be told you've changed, that you're no longer who you used to be. That is correct. You are not who you were, you are. And while some will walk away, others will be drawn to the authenticity now emanating from your presence. Real connection can only be built on truth. Anything else is performance. The journey from mask to shadow, and from shadow to self, is not a single event. It is a lifelong unfolding. Each layer revealed brings more clarity, more congruence. You begin to trust yourself, not because you are perfect, but because you are whole. You see yourself in full, and in that seeing, you find compassion. You understand that every hidden part had a reason, a history, a wound. And as you bring light to those places, healing begins not as the erasure of pain, but as the embrace of truth. To drop the mask is to enter into a sacred contract with your soul. It is a vow to live not from the expectations of others, but from the depths of your own being. It is the choice to be real rather than liked, to be honest rather than admired, to be whole rather than hollow. And in that choice, you begin to remember who you were before the world told you who to be. There is a sacred moment in every life when the ground beneath what you thought was certain begins to tremble. The beliefs you held tightly no longer comfort you. The roles you played so well begin to feel foreign. The people you once surrounded yourself with may no longer hear your voice. And the voice inside of you, the one you silenced for so long, begins to speak with a clarity that is both unsettling and undeniable. This is not the end of the road. This is the beginning of awakening. But every awakening is preceded by collapse. The ego is a careful architect. It builds a life around what keeps us safe, what gains us acceptance, what avoids rejection. It creates a fortress of certainty from the raw materials of survival. But survival is not the same as living. The ego does not seek wholeness. It seeks control. It protects us from the unknown, even if the known is suffocating. And when the soul begins to stir, to call us into something deeper, the ego resists with everything it has. It tells you to stay in the relationship that no longer feels alive. It whispers that it's too late to change, too dangerous to let go. It reminds you of your responsibilities, your image, your history, and so you hesitate. You hold on. But the truth does not retreat. The collapse is rarely dramatic in appearance. Often it begins in the quiet, a growing discontent, a tiredness that rest cannot cure, a sense that you are living beside your life, not within it. You may feel ungrateful for questioning a life that appears good on the surface. But the soul is not concerned with appearances. It knows when something essential is missing, even when the world tells you to be satisfied. And so, the unraveling begins. This unraveling is not a failure, it is a shedding. The loss of what no longer serves who you are becoming. It can look like confusion, like depression, like a sudden withdrawal from things you once loved. It can feel like floating without direction, like silence after a long, loud performance. But underneath the disorientation is something profoundly sacred. Space. Space for truth. Space for depth. Space for the emergence of the authentic self. We are not taught to honor this stage. We are taught to fix it, to push through it, to medicate it away. But this disintegration is not a disorder, it is an invitation. The soul does not speak in the language of convenience. It speaks in symbols, in emotion, in longing. And when the old identity no longer fits, it will not allow you to remain in it peacefully. This is not cruelty, it is evolution. The collapse clears the path for new sight. When the structures of the false self fall away, you begin to see what was always waiting beneath. You remember what you loved before the world told you who to be. You feel the stirrings of passions long buried. You recognize the boundaries you never set, the truths you never voiced. It is in this nakedness that the real self begins to emerge, not constructed, but uncovered. This emergence does not happen all at once. It comes in fragments, in flashes. A conversation that suddenly reveals your true values. A morning when you wake and know, without doubt, that something must change. A sense of calm that appears not because everything is resolved, but because you are finally aligned. This is the new ground being laid. Not built from fear, but from soul. But do not romanticize this stage. It is not comfortable. It may isolate you. It may undo relationships built on the version of you that no longer exists. It may leave you feeling like a stranger in your own life. That is because you are becoming someone new. Not someone artificial, but someone original. Someone who belongs to themselves. The greatest breakthroughs are often born from the greatest breakdowns. Not because we are meant to suffer, but because the ego must surrender for the soul to lead. And surrender is not weakness, it is the highest act of courage. It is saying, I no longer know who I am, but I am willing to find out. It is stepping into the unknown, not with certainty, but with faith in the unfolding. And from that space, something profound begins to awaken. You begin to live not from the outside in, but from the inside out. You become less concerned with being understood and more committed to being true. You no longer ask the world for permission to exist as you are. And slowly, steadily, you realize the collapse was never your end. It was your beginning. The moment the false self fell apart was the moment your soul began to breathe. Asterisk. The soul does not seek perfection. It seeks wholeness. And wholeness is not found in the pursuit of an ideal self, but in the courageous acceptance of all that you are, light and shadow, strength and vulnerability, wisdom and wound. The journey of individuation does not require that you become flawless. It requires that you become real. To strive for perfection is to cling to an illusion. But to strive for wholeness is to come home to yourself. Perfection is born from fear. It is a mask we wear to protect ourselves from rejection, from shame, from the feeling of not being enough. It is the voice that says, I will be worthy when, or I will be loved if. This voice is not the soul's. It is the echo of early conditioning, the internalized gaze of a world that measures worth in appearances, achievements, and conformity. But the soul cannot be measured. It can only be known. And it reveals itself not through control, but through surrender. To become whole is to welcome what you have spent years denying. It is to sit with the discomfort of your own imperfection without flinching. It is to look in the mirror and no longer turn away. Not because you see something ideal, but because you finally see something true. This truth may not be polished. It may not be what others expect, but it is yours. And that makes it sacred that the parts of yourself that you have rejected do not vanish. They live in the unconscious, waiting to be seen, to be understood, to be brought into the light of your awareness. This is the shadow, not a place of evil, but a reservoir of unlived life. When we integrate the shadow, we do not become darker, we become fuller. We retrieve the creativity that was buried beneath shame. We reclaim the confidence that was silenced by criticism. We reawaken the voice that was told it was too loud, too emotional, too much. This is not an easy process. It demands a new kind of strength, not the strength to conquer, but the strength to confront. To sit with your sadness and not rush to fix it. To name your anger without letting it control you. To admit your fear without being ruled by it. This is the strength of wholeness. It is quiet, steady, enduring. It is the foundation upon which a meaningful life is built. And in this wholeness, something beautiful begins to happen. You stop striving to be someone else. You stop comparing, performing, chasing. You begin to live in alignment with your inner truth. Your choices reflect your values. Your relationships deepen. Your boundaries strengthen. And even your pain begins to take on new meaning, not as something to be escaped, but as something that shaped you, taught you, refined you. Wholeness does not mean you no longer suffer. It means your suffering no longer defines you. It means that you can walk through the fire of your own transformation and emerge not burned, but illuminated. You begin to live with presence. You become attuned to the subtleties of your own experience. You stop running. You start listening. Many will try to skip this step. They will try to create a life around appearances, accomplishments, accolades. But all of it will feel hollow if it is not rooted in truth. You can build a tower that touches the sky, but if it rests on the denial of your inner reality, it will eventually fall. Wholeness is the only foundation that endures, because it is not built from illusion. It is built from integration. That you were never meant to be perfect. You were meant to be complete. You were not born to conform to someone else's ideal of success, or beauty, or worth. You were born to unfold, to awaken, to become. And that becoming includes everything. The joy and the sorrow, the triumph and the mistake, the clarity and the confusion. All of it belongs. All of it is part of your path. The soul does not ask for you to be more than you are. It asks that you be fully who you are. That you stop fragmenting yourself to fit into spaces that cannot hold your truth. That you stop apologizing for your depth, your complexity, your intensity. These are not flaws. They are signs of life. Signs that your soul is awake. To become whole is to take back the pieces, to gather the forgotten, the exiled, the silenced parts of yourself, and welcome them back into the circle of your being. Not to be tamed, but to be understood. Not to be erased, but to be healed. Not to be judged, but to be held. This is the key. True journey, not upward toward perfection, but inward toward presence. Asterisk, and so, the journey begins not outward, but inward. Not toward perfection, but toward wholeness. Not toward becoming someone else, but toward reclaiming who you have always been beneath the noise, beneath the conditioning, beneath the mask. This path is not paved with certainty. It is not lit by approval. It is not measured by how well others understand you. It is walked in solitude, illuminated by the quiet fire of your own truth. Not to walk the path of individuation is to make a sacred vow. I will no longer abandon myself. I will no longer betray my intuition for belonging. I will no longer silence my voice to maintain peace. I will no longer shape my soul into forms that make others comfortable. Instead, I will turn inward. I will face the truths I have feared, the wounds I have hidden, the desires I have denied. I will sit with the shadow, not as an enemy, but as a teacher. I will allow the light and dark within me to speak, to merge, to transform me into something real. This is not an easy vow. The world does not reward wholeness. It rewards performance. But a life built on performance is hollow. No applause can fill the space left by a soul that has gone unheard. No success can silence the whisper that says, "This is not who I am." The pain of inauthenticity is subtle but suffocating. And sooner or later, we all arrive at a crossroads. Continue the performance, or begin the pilgrimage home. And if you choose the latter, you must prepare to be changed. Not instantly, not without resistance, but inevitably. Because the more you live from your center, the less you can tolerate anything that pulls you away from it. The more you listen to your soul, the louder it speaks. The more you stand in your truth, the less space there is for illusion. You begin to see with new eyes. You begin to feel with a depth that once frightened you. And in that depth, you discover your strength, not the strength of force, but the strength of alignment. You are not here to become a copy of someone else's idea of worth. You are here to become your own. And that means allowing the process to unfold. It means being patient with the parts of you that are still learning, still healing, still afraid. It means offering yourself the compassion you so easily give to others. Because this journey is not a straight line, it is a spiral. You will revisit wounds. You will question your progress. But each time, you will return with more wisdom, more self-awareness, more courage. Individuatio is not a destination. It is a way of living, a way of being in relationship with yourself and with the world. It is the quiet, revolutionary act of becoming whole in a world that profits from your fragmentation. And when you live from that wholeness, you do not just change yourself, you change everything your life touches. This is your soul's journey. Walk it bravely. Walk it fully. Walk it as only you can.